folks. Thank you all for coming and being a part of this, what is now an annual tradition, uh, sponsored by the Institute of General Semantics, our online symposium. As we've done in the past, we continue with the theme for the in-person symposium that was held back this past fall in New York City in conjunction with our annual Alfred Korzybski Memorial Lecture, the theme being communication, consciousness, and culture. That's why this is Communication, Consciousness, and Culture 2 as the theme for this year's online symposium. And we're really pleased to be able to hold these events. I do want to encourage you, if you're not already a member of the Institute of General Semantics, that you should be, and also to encourage others to join our merry crew. The IGS participates and sponsors many activities. This online meeting, which, as you can see, we go all around the world because we are, based in New York and international, global in our scope. We haven't quite reached Antarctica yet, but we're working on it. So among our online events, last fall, we had a reading group for Science and Sanity, which was quite successful, met about 14 times over the fall and early winter months. And those sessions were recorded and are available on a members-only page on our website. This fall, we'll be having a reading group led by Corey Anton on a shorter book, a slightly shorter book by Alfred Korzybski called General Semantics Seminar. And both of these have been published by us in new editions. And we also have online courses. Just in February, we had one taught by Mary Lehman, Language and Thought, and we'll be offering that again. It serves as a kind of introduction to general semantics for those not familiar with it, and we'll have other courses as well in the future. We also, of course, have live in-person events that include a live seminar, in-person seminar. 2 years ago, we held that in New York, last year in London. This year, it'll be held in Mexico City, courtesy of Laura Trujillo, and will be held immediately after the annual meeting of the Media Ecology Association. So the MEA convention is June 5th to 8th. The seminar will take place from the 9th to 11th, and there's still room to hop on board for that. Also coming up later this month in New York, we have a special event on April 29th, a memorial for Gary Gumpert, who was a scholar of communication. And in conjunction with that, we'll hold a special screening of a almost never seen TV. It was originally broadcast on UHF TV, if you know what that means. So maybe no one ever saw it before when it was broadcast, but featuring Marshall McLuhan and Harley Parker and another colleague talking really early on about the kinds of material that he later became famous for. And of course, our annual Alfred Korzybski Memorial Lecture will be in New York on October 3rd. And this year, the speaker will be Tristan Harris, best known for his work in the Social Dilemma documentary. And it'll be followed by a symposium on discourse, dialogue, and democracy. But of course, we're open to all kinds of things of interest to general semantics. And finally, we also publish, we have our journal, etc., that is put out and that the editor, Tom Gencarelli, takes care of. as well as publishing books, including, as I mentioned, it was the 6th edition of Science and Sanity, as well as a French translation of the work, a new edition of General Semantics Seminar, the Olivet College Lectures. We also have published at the end of last year a collection of my own work called Not A, Not B, and C, or etc. And 2 books coming out in the coming months will be Sensible Thinking 3 by Marty Levinson and General Semantics and Politics, a collection edited by Tom and Corey Anton. So there's a lot going on, and we want to invite you all to join us. It's really quite the bargain, even just for the journal, which comes out in print. The price of membership dues, and we just really are interested in what you can have to say, what you can contribute, and in sharing, especially at this critical time in world history. And with that, I'll turn things over to the moderator for the first session, Eva Berger, who comes to us from the College of Management Academic Studies in Tel Aviv. Eva, it's all yours.
Thanks, Lance, and hello, everybody. I'm gonna get right to it. Just a reminder that each one of the speakers has 15 minutes. I'm gonna send you a message, a private message about 3 minutes before that. And if you go way over, I'm gonna interrupt and ask you to come to a close. Having said that, you can find more details about each of the speakers online, but I'm going to present our first presenter, Renee Peterson from RMIT University in Australia, and the title of her talk is The Celebrities Successfully Navigating Their Contemporary Media Environments as Social Media Influencers in 2025. Renee, take it away.
Thank you so much, Eva. One moment, and I'm just going to see if I can share my screen, which I just had to get a request for that. So let's do that. One moment. So just making sure everybody can see my presentation. Yes, thank you for the nod. Awesome. Thank you so much. I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land which the RMIT University stands and where I conduct my research respectively, recognised as elders both past, present and emerging. So where you're watching online today in Australia and worldwide. So my presentation focus is the celebrities successfully navigating their contemporary media environments as social media influencers in 2025. I'm honoured to be invited to speak about my research at the Institute of General Semantics, Communication, Consciousness and Culture 2, an online symposium held in the US and going around the world today, April 19, 2025, starting in Australia with me. Please allow me to introduce myself. So a bit about me. I'm a radio and television journalist and presenter, executive producer and writer with 2 decades of experience working across the commercial media industry in Australia, Los Angeles, New York and internationally. Alongside my media career, I'm also an academic lecturer and tutor at the University of Melbourne in Australia, RMIT University and Victoria University. I'm currently completing my PhD in the School of Media and Communication, and my research project is titled From Screen Celebrity to Social Media Influencer. This is a creative practice-based research project with a podcast series of 5 episodes as the creative artifact in alignment with my 50,000 word dissertation. To kick it off, I would like to play my podcast for you, as you previously had seen just before. That's my website and my show reel. The podcast series is a conduit between the media industry and academia, providing critical insight into how celebrities navigate and adapt and influence the contemporary media environment to establish themselves as successful social media influencers.
From Screen Celebrity to Social Media Influencer is a series created, written, produced, and researched by media professional, PhD candidate, and future Doctor of Media, Renee Peterson.
Ryan Seacrest. I'm Oprah Winfrey.
My name is James Corden.
Hey guys, this is Todd tonight.
Renee Peterson on the black carpet for the premiere of Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 2.
My name is Lance Strate.
Welcome to the series From Screen Celebrity to Social Media Influencer. I'm Renee Peterson. I am an Australian commercial radio and television presenter, producer, writer, social media master, and an attributed celebrity. My passion for media has directed my career path to become a PhD candidate within the media and communication research field. My PhD is a creative practice-based project. The focus is how a celebrity engages within the contemporary media ecology, their media practices, and their relationship with their social media producer that affords the celebrity to be influential on social media platforms as an influencer. The series features a plethora of worldwide, well-known radio, television, film, and music celebrities and social media producers employed in the contemporary media ecology who discuss their lived experiences as celebrities and social media influencers.
Listen to the series From Screen Celebrity to Social Media Influencer, hosted by Renee Peterson at reneepeterson.com. Spoken by the voiceover guy, authorised by Renee Peterson, future Doctor of Media.
So for my presentation today, I'll be focusing on the attributed celebrity as defined by Dr. Christopher Bell. Examples in the US are radio and television hosts Howard Stern, Ryan Seacrest. An Australian example is the Australian radio host Kyle Sandilands and Jackie O. Dr. Christopher Bell, please share with us what an attributed celebrity is.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Christopher Bell, and I am joining Dr. Renee Peterson on the series From Screen Celebrity to Social Media. In my book, I write about how attributed celebrity is a sort of concentrated focus with a cultural intermediary, such as a journalist or a publicist or a photographer, a talk show host. Attributed celebrity is the celebrity that is generated by media. So this is your sort of quintessential being famous for being famous. The most classic example of this are the Kardashians, right? The Kardashians are literally famous for being famous. One day we didn't know who they were, and then the next day they were everywhere just because media were covering them, and because they were on television shows, and because they were in magazines, and people were like, who are they? And the reason people were like, who are they, is because they were nobody. And that's the point of it. Attributed celebrity is the celebrity that media generates for somebody.
Media ecology is one of the three key concepts in my theoretical framework, alongside celebrity, as discussed by Dr. Christopher Bell, and social media influencer. Media ecology, as most of you would know, is the study of media as environments, and the idea that technology and techniques, modes of information, and codes of communication play a leading role in human affairs. So celebrities and social media influencers live within a contemporary media environment that includes both traditional media, or as in academic literature, which I've discovered over my journey as a PhD candidate, is called old media, and new media on social media platforms. How are they successful becoming professional social media influencers in 2025? It is due to them using their daily media practices, action by themselves or their social media producer across social media platforms. And this is a key focus of my research. This ignites a key question driving both academic inquiry and industry relevance. What are the scholars saying about celebrity and their relationship with the media environment? Media environment and the celebrity. It is the relationship between the media environment and the celebrity that affords the creation of a celebrity in conjunction with the cultures of media platforms. So, what are the media industry professionals understanding about media as environment? Please meet Steve Ahern. He's an Australian attributed celebrity, social media influencer, radio announcer, podcaster, author, and also spoke recently at the UN.
I defined the term professional media to describe broadcast media, I guess, as it sits in an age now where anyone can publish media content. And I had several characteristics. One, professional media publish with a purpose that's greater than themselves. So a newspaper, a radio station, TV station, there is a purpose. It may just be to make money, but often it's a greater purpose still. There's an element of contributing to society. Those non-professional social media influencers, those accidental celebrities, if you like, they don't have that. They may gain it, they may seek it, but when they start, they don't have a purpose that's greater than themselves. Second thing was that they're professionals who are trained to deliver their content to clearly identified audience segments that want the content. They're hungry for that content. Third element is professionals who enrich their own culture and society. Fourth is professionals who stimulate thought and imagination. Fifth is those who are guided by rules, regulations, codes of ethics and principles that have been developed by their society to set limits on what they do. And the last one, we need to develop some rules, some regulations. We need to have a regulator to enforce that. And the media environment, the professional media environment we know today was developed. And I just think we're living through the early days, again, the cowboy days, where there are no rules on these new platforms, and it's exciting and interesting. But I can see that in 10 years' time, our societies will realise what's going on and they will expect the same kind of regulation that broadcast media has evolved to.
And you might have read in the news, possibly with Australia and the government wanting to introduce a law for anyone under the age of 16, no access to social media influencers. But back to the celebrity, obviously the concept of celebrity is very prominent in my PhD research. It's been examined by many academic scholars. Daniel Borstein obviously defines the celebrity as a person who is known for his well-knownness. My research looks at other scholars such as Graham Turner, David P. Marshall, Christopher Bell, but obviously for this presentation and the majority of my research, I'm looking at Dr. Christopher Bell's 5 types of celebrity. But of course, I have to address social media influencer because why are celebrities becoming social media influencers in 2025? It's important to understand that a social media influencer in my research explores an influencer who's built a public profile across platforms such as Instagram and TikTok, and to be recognized as a social media influencer, the individual must create content that resonates and engages with the audience. So the social media influencer's career is successful via the online content they create, the engagement with their audience, and if a celebrity is also using old or traditional media platforms to capture that audience via TV and radio and put them in a unique position of taking the social media influencers' audiences across to the contemporary media environment. So obviously the question is, the celebrities successfully navigating the contemporary media environments as social media influencers in 2025. Please meet Ash London. She is a successful celebrity doing this. She's an attributed celebrity, also a social media influencer. But in the discussion in the podcast series, I asked her, who does she think is this successful celebrity navigating to become a social media influencer?
I guess Howard Stern is a great example of someone who, we've had a couple more Howard Sterns on a platform that was live and accessible. But then again, it begs the question, wasn't that just radio? So I don't know.
I know. I mean, I love Howard Stern too, and I love his interviews, but he's definitely made the professional transition from old school radio across America, but across countries, and his social media content is next level.
Yeah, and he did it early. When
early.
a lot of people were still really scared of the idea of Sirius or whatever it was, he had the foresight to jump, which I think was so brave and so smart.
So celebrities are like a collection of puzzle pieces found across a large number of media. And you know, when you look at celebrities that are successful in navigating the contemporary media environment as a social media influencer, how are they doing it? And this is Simone Heng, an Australian attributed celebrity, a social media influencer, a keynote speaker. And here is her insight into how she thinks the celebrity is doing it.
Where social media, why it's growing faster and usurping old media, is because you get a much quicker feedback loop compared to television, of course, for example, even more than radio. Television, it is so hard to have that feedback loop between what does the audience want and how do I get that information to the producer? You have that immediately on social media. So I can change how I did a video last night, and I can do testing tonight at my fingertips in my house and get better. Now, with television, rejigging what you're filming for tomorrow when you get information yesterday is really difficult. And even that way with radio stations that have huge content teams, that you're accountable to other people, you're accountable to sales clients, you're accountable to this. The agility of social media is what makes it this like wondrous thing. And I think that's why it's winning, because it goes, hey, this is what my audience wants. And tomorrow I can give them what I want. They don't have to wait after we have a programming meeting weekly. They don't have to wait till the ratings come in and we get some sort of feedback for our TV show. We can do this nightly. And that is the speed with which people now live. And media must reflect the speed of.
So what is the future? Celebrity, social media and media environments. You know, obviously looking at this research with my PhD, it's really important, you know, the evolution of new media, challenging the traditional media personality like myself, the journalist, and celebrities, the 5 types of celebrities as defined by Dr. Christopher Bell, to make a professional transition into becoming a successful social media in order, obviously, to survive the evolving contemporary media environment. And I think that Aberdeen sums it up quite well. Digital culture on social media and celebrity culture on traditional media are also weaving into each other, such that breakout stars from one-hit viral videos can parlay their transient fame into a full-time career, while ailing legacy media formats learn to capitalize upon vernacular participatory culture to sustain their businesses. And finally, I would like to give you an example of a attributed celebrity, also my former co-host on my Top 40 radio countdown show and television show in Australia. His name is Matty Acton. He's an attributed celebrity and a very successful social media influencer. He has basically leveraged his media career from old media and adapted it to social media platforms. And most recently, I sent him a photo of a photo shoot which we used for our radio show. He took that photo, created this video, and it had over 2 million views. And there we are. So obviously, Matty is a clear example of a successful celebrity navigating the evolving media environment and transitioning from traditional/old media into a successful social media influencer in 2025. Stay tuned for my podcast and the publication of that and the completion of my PhD from screen celebrity to social media influencer. The goal is to submit it for examination. Thank you so much for letting me share my research with you. A special thanks to Lance, who always invites me. And please feel free to connect with me via my website or my LinkedIn. And it's an absolute pleasure to present my research again. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Renee. Thank you very much. We'll move right on to our next speaker, Chris Chesher from the University of Sydney, Australia. And the title of his talk is Convergences of Text, Image, and Number in Generative AI. Chris?
Hi. Yeah, I'm going to share my screen. I don't know if, yep, here we go. Yeah, I'm very delighted to be here again. And I do want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm on, which is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation here in Sydney, and pay respect to their elders past and present. Okay, today I'm going to kind of be a bit of a troublemaker because this paper is kind of engaging with one of Lance's most recent books, a chapter in his book on text, image, or words, image, and and number. So I'll get started. This is an AI enhanced paper. The images, and I have used AI in helping me to write this paper, so I just want to acknowledge that. Conventionally, words, images, and numbers have been seen as distinct representational systems, each with unique characteristics. So text is symbolic and linguistic, images capture visual and perceptual patterns, and numbers offer precise quantitative abstraction. Recent advances in text-to-image AI, what I refer to as autolography, including Midjourney, DALL-E, and ChatGPT, implicitly challenge these conventional separations, uncovering interactions and interdependencies among textual, visual, and numerical representations. These emerging technologies highlight intricate interplays and blurred boundaries, prompting a re-examination of how meanings have always been constructed across different modes. So in this paper, I'll start with a brief explanation of how multimodal models work with text and image as vectors in shared latent spaces. I'll then present Lance Strate's recent argument from a general semantics and media ecology perspective that words, images, and numbers are quite distinct. I'll then outline W.J.T. Mitchell's argument that images and texts have actually always been intermingled. My main contention is that multimodal AI demonstrates empirically, numerically, and visually that texts and images were never discrete modes of conveying meaning. The enormous corpuses of found, often stolen images and texts are modeled statistically to provide evidence that different semiotic modes are inextricably and intricately intertwined. Finally, I'll argue that not only do multimodal AI models show that mingling of text and image, but also the modeling process captures other patterns in the data, such as social power, movement, affect, even sound, certainly space and embodiment. Okay, so the technique of modeling the relationships between text and image comes from tokenizing and segmenting images and converting both text and image into vectors and embedding these vectors in a shared latent space. During training, the model learns statistical associations between textual tokens, such as the word dog, and corresponding visual features in images of dogs. These vectors cluster in proximity, reflecting semantic similarity. For instance, the word cat and images of cats may be embedded near dog due to a shared conceptual features, because both are common household pets. The model also learns to distinguish between different image modalities, such as photographs and illustrations, by assigning them distinct but related positions in latent space. Here is what happened when I gave Midjourney the prompt, a sausage dog pulling on a lead, looking longingly at a steaming pepperoni pizza on the ground. You got to do random things like that. Despite the evident distortions and biases in these autolographic images, the fact that written prompts consistently produce images that we can make sense of seems to indicate that the model captures these intrinsic links between the different modes that I'm talking about. So how does it work? Well, a diffusion model such as Midjourney begins by generating a field of random noise. Through a series of iterative steps, the model gradually refines this noise into a coherent image via a process called denoising. This process is not arbitrary, it's guided by a textual prompt. which is converted into a vector representation or embedding using a large language model or text encoder. These embeddings are projected into a shared latent space and condition the denoising process by influencing how visual features are reconstructed based on relationships learned during training. The diffusion model uses this information iteratively to sculpt the image, attempting to ensure that elements like the dog, the lead, the steaming pizza, and their spatial relationships align with both the literal content and the visual conventions inferred from the training data. The result is an image that statistically best matches the prompt's intent, as understood by the model's internal representations. And different platforms interpret and resolve these prompts with varying degrees of fidelity. For example, Midjourney that I showed you a moment ago produces highly stylized images, but can struggle with spatial coherence and perspective. By contrast, models like Google's ImageN and OpenAI's DALL-E, which is used through ChatGPT, tend to produce more semantically accurate and visually coherent scenes with a closer alignment between the text's compositional logic and the generated visual output. So, do increasingly effective multimodal models challenge the general semantics view that text possesses unique properties that make it the most important mode of communication in modern civilization? What are the relationships between these semiotic modes? Well, Lance Strate outlines traditional divisions among modes of representation, asserting that text, image, and number each serve qualitatively different functions in abstraction. Textual communication is predominantly linguistic and symbolic, employing sequential and syntactic logic to convey meaning. Images, by contrast, are iconic, grounded in visual perception and spatial organization. Numbers differ again, offering quantitative clarity through measurement, calculation, and formal abstraction. Strate argues that these three modes are not merely interchangeable tools, but represent fundamentally different symbolic forms, each with distinctive cognitive, communicative, and cultural biases. Drawing on media ecology and general semantics, Strate insists that word, image, and number are qualitatively distinct symbolic codes, comparable not by degree, but by kind. He says they're like apples, oranges, and bananas. Words are conceptual and abstract. Images are perceptual and concrete. Numbers are rational and abstract in a different sense, tied to precision and digital logic. Images excel at evoking immediate perception and emotion. Words foster reflection, ambiguity, and imagination. Numbers provide precise and unambiguous abstraction. And importantly, Strate argues that these differences are not merely technical, but deeply historical and cultural. The modern world, he contends, has been increasingly dominated by the extremes of image and number, marginalizing the balanced cognitive and communicative role once played by the word. Visual media, like TV, film, social media, and quantitative logic, like data analytics, algorithms, and digitization, have reshaped public discourse, often at the expense of rational deliberation and imaginative engagement. In this context, Strate calls for the restoration of the word as a happy medium between image and number, an anchoring symbolic form capable of mediating between perceptual immediacy and abstract precision, emotion and logic, intuition and calculation. However, others like W.J.T. Mitchell argue that texts, images, and numbers have never been isolated from one another in culture. Like lived experience, material visual cultures have always been multimodal. He introduces the concept of image texts, arguing that images and texts do not simply coexist, but actively shape and transform each other, creating hybrid forms that transcend the boundaries traditionally separating visual and linguistic representation. Neither images nor texts have primacy. Rather, their significance is co-produced through dynamic interaction. He cites various modes of image-text relationships, such as captions modifying and anchoring the meaning of images, illustrations visually amplifying textual narratives, or political cartoons depending equally on visual representation and linguistic labels for their communicative power. Mitchell critiques the conventional assumption that images primarily evoke emotions or sensations, while texts convey rational or abstract meanings, instead proposing a nuanced understanding of their integrated communicative functions. He also considers the historical and cultural context shaping image-text interactions, exploring how their relational dynamics vary across genres, media, and periods. By proposing the concept of image text, he challenges traditional hierarchies, privileging text over the vision, thereby advocating a more comprehensive analytical framework. Building on Mitchell's concept of image texts, the effectiveness of contemporary AI image generators like Midjourney offer compelling evidence for the deeply entangled relationship between text and image in the cultural record. As mentioned earlier, these systems are trained on massive data sets containing paired textual and visual material, embedding not only representational patterns, but also the dominant cultural associations and visual tropes that have historically linked language and imagery. When a user inputs a prompt, for example, create an image of a smiling woman looking out of the window of a house at a man sitting on a bench, the AI doesn't generate a neutral or purely imaginative scene. Instead, it draws on statistically prominent pairings in the training data, producing outputs that reflect cultural defaults and also the style of the platform, because Midjourney likes to represent kind of an artistic approach, but you can also see that it produces certain kind of nostalgic cliches. In this case, the image features young, white, conventionally attractive people and a generic middle-class suburban home. So this kind of output reveals how AI systems, through the reliance on those text-image associations, reproduce the visual imagination of the cultural archive from which they learn. Without specific instructions to deviate from these defaults, they regenerate stereotypical and normative representations. In addition to reflecting cultural conventions, ChatGPT's recent introduction of image generation attempts to model spatial relations from textual prompts. For instance, using the same prompt as before, ChatGPT places the woman inside, framed by the window, and the man outside on the nearby bench, suggesting that it's learned common spatial configurations from patterns in its training data. However, the spatial logic is often inconsistent. In this series of generated images, the position of the bench varies, sometimes directly under the window, and other times sitting at different angles. These distortions highlight the model's reliance on probabilistic associations rather than a stable internal understanding of space. And that underscores the limits of generative AI's spatial modeling, even as it reinforces the tight coupling between language and image in its outputs. So generative AI fundamentally challenges traditional conceptions that text, image, and number are separate domains by demonstrating significant convergence of text and image through numerical statistics. By automating translation across modalities through numerical abstraction, AI not only reshapes cultural understandings, representation, and creativity, but also calls for new theoretical frameworks to accommodate the complex interplay among these modes. These insights ultimately invite further exploration into the dynamic, interconnected nature of textual, visual, and numerical meaning making in contemporary digital culture.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to our third speaker, keeping things on time so that we have time for some Q&A perhaps at the end. Our next speaker is Bini Babu Sudha from Nirma University in India. And the title of her talk is Dystopic Imagination as Social Critique, a General Semantics Analysis. Go ahead. You're muted.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the title of my paper is Dystopian Imagination as Social Critique, a General Semantics Analysis. Referring to dystopian novels, this study looks at the brutal exercises of power that intimidate humans into submission and transform them into animals or machines with superhuman efficiency. The epistemic violence implicit in the calculated misuse of language and ideas. Propaganda and censorship is another thematic terrain mapped by the study. Dystopian fiction transposes the experience and observed life worlds to a terrain of allegorical fantasy and has become a mode of social commentary and criticism. The Vigo, or what is going on in dystopian fiction, seems close to home, or at least relatable to some extent. One may feel enmeshed in the coordinates of the maps of dystopia, as if the genre charts versions of our existence and histories. To use a Koshupskian expression, there is an underlying structural similarity between dystopian novels and our life worlds. What constitutes a dystopia is analyzed using Koshupskian perceptual framework developed in The Manhood of Humanity and Science and Sanity, that document the historical dystopias arising from human time binding errors and insane orientations of the 20th century. Unfortunately, we still carry that doomed legacy with us, making Koshupski's warnings relevant even today. Dystopian novels make inroads into dense landscapes of tyrannical domination, neurosemantic distortions, and unapologetic discrimination, marked with the vacuum of freedom, equality, rights, and justice. As cartographers of our experiential territories, George Orwell, Aldous Huxley, Ray Bradbury, and William Golding portray ruthless control and corruption of social institutions and the effects of epistemic violence in their dystopic novels. As long as we fail to distance ourselves from the mythological exaltation of our species and the zoological misconceptions of what we are and should be, the problem of abuse of power will persist. How culture degenerates because of the animal in humans is a central idea in Animal Farm and Lord of the Flies. The utopian vision of liberty, equality, and cooperation of all humans was the founding principle of the commune in Animal Farm. In this historical allegory of the horrors of the Stalinist era, the zoological orientations prevail, rendering the principles of loving kindness and compassion irrelevant. The map of democratic socialism had no structural similarity to the terrain of the post-revolutionary scenario of totalitarianism in the post-revolutionary Soviet Union. While most of the contemporary democracies exhibit the symptoms of totalitarianism, we need to diagnose it better. Brutal and violent power in totalitarian regimes is enabled through multiple factors, such as blind faith in leaders and the failure of intellectuals to challenge oppression and epistemic violence with radical knowledge, ideas, and actions. Most importantly, totalitarianism is reinforced by the passive submission of the people to authority owing to fear, indifference, and ignorance. Remember the prognosis in Eric Fromm's Fear of Freedom and Hannah Arendt's Origins of Totalitarianism. A majority of the totalitarian regimes witnessed remarkable advancements in technology and applied sciences and showed a decline in the domains of knowledge about the human mind, society, and culture. When critical thinking, dissensus, and creativity emanating from arts, humanities, and social sciences deteriorated, people developed a mechanical, unfeeling attitude, similar to the machine men with machine hearts that Charlie Chaplin referred to in his speech in The Great Dictator. When humans became cogs in the machines or automata, they turn into worst kinds of time binders, who are the ideal docile subjects to despotic authority. Such humans are also unconcerned about the collective well being of the species. In 1984, the protagonist, Winston Smith, is one of the operating forces of the propaganda machine, namely the Ministry of Truth, and is effortlessly intimidated into submission. A nightmare of technocracy and rigid social categorization, the world state in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World depicts efficient governance by turning the population into unthinking, unfeeling, and highly efficient human machine interfaces. Another dystopian novel about brute power and docile submission is Lord of the Flies by William Golding. These novels illustrate the fragility of civilizational values that humans are so proud of. They remind that they remind us that the violent and selfish variety of survival instinct belongs to the space binders and chemical binders. And if time binders surrender to it, human societies and civilization would be doomed beyond redemption. Alfred Koshevsky read World War I in this light in Manhood of Humanity and warned us not to descend into primal, beastly savagery and to hold on to the humanity left in us. Absolute power could be what God is believed to be: omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. The exercise of power is total when it reaches every nook and cranny of our being and existence through surveillance and the network of bureaucracy and the institutions that control the minutest aspects of our lives and selves. In 1984, in the regime of Oceania, there is a dominant figure masquerading as a benevolent authority, pretending to be the citizen's kin and a well-wisher. The city has posters and television screens reminding the people that Big Brother is watching you, watching over to protect, and watching to detect transgressions, lose their distinctions in such a surveillance society. Interestingly, the British Libertarian Party launched the 1984 campaign in 2008 to resist the transitioning of the country into a police state that had flooded every space of London with surveillance devices by sending a copy of 1984 to the members of the parliament with a note saying, "This book was a warning, not a blueprint." Now we will look at the epistemic nuances in dystopia. Koshevsky was wary of the dangers of science stripped of humanity and sanity. The world has seen its armed conflicts. The world has seen in its armed conflicts how science and technology can be utilized for creating weapons of mass destruction. Scientific progress and the advent of technology in environments devoid of time binding rationale could give rise to precarious conditions. Koshevsky uses the voyage to Laputa from Gulliver's Travels as a threshold to science and sanity. The world state in Brave New World is also a Laputa, indicating incomplete and lopsided time binding, making it a dystopic realm. The society in Fahrenheit 451 shares similar traits with the technocratic regime in Brave New World. People do not read books of poetry, appreciate the beauty and mysteries of nature and art, enjoy solitary ruminations, or care to spend time with others. The practices of debate and discussion have eroded. Instead, the humans are held captive by massive television screens attached to the walls and the Cecil radio set stuck to their ears. Firemen burn books and the spaces that house them or the people who own them. The text portrays a society that has normalized epistemic violence, censorship, and curtailment of the freedom of expression. Ironically, Fahrenheit 451 was expunged, censored, and banned in many countries. Controlling knowledge and information has been a strategy followed by all fascist societies to stifle critical thinking and dissent. Turning people into mindless consumers of central visual media and giving them access to only official versions of truth makes the citizens more governable and less prone to resistance. When Nazi Germany burnt books, Stalin's Great Purge eliminated the thinkers and writers with non-conforming views through exile and execution. Big Brother and his cronies in 1984 and the pigs and dogs in Animal Farm are shown as adept in neurosemantic manipulation and destroyers of dissident ideas. Koshevsky warned in Science and Sanity, I quote, our rulers who rule our symbols and so rule a symbolic class of life impose their own infantilism on our institutions, educational methods and doctrines, end quote. In 1984, doublespeak and newspeak ensure the total cerebral and emotional submission of the population to the will of Big Brother. The official language of Oceania, Newspeak, illustrates how language could be used for limiting human thinking and not for the expansion of human mind and its imaginative faculties. Language here becomes a tool for neurosemantic control, characterized by unjust domination that Koshevsky warned us about. In Koshevsky's opinion, language impacts and sometimes correct our thoughts, behavior, and actions. Like Orwell, he knew how how the powerful use language to create a false sense of autonomy and agency in their subjects. In the dystopian societies of Brave New World and 1984, individuals are conditioned through propaganda, media, and fear tactics. Even the forms of entertainment become means of psychological control that enable individuals to assume their predetermined social roles and status. Conformity of the population to the will and whims of the powers that be is guaranteed by implementing a reward punishment mechanism, like the training and taming of dogs. Under these circumstances, a majority of the population gets converted to happy pets of the master, drooling for treats, tail wagging, bootlicking loyalists, and creatures of empty barks who dare not ever bite. Deviations from the approved pattern of behavior are brutally punished or dealt with a tactical use of social isolation in dystopian regimes of Brave New World and 1984. Top it all, the dystopian regimes uh, the dystopian regimes provide blissful distractions to their citizens. Public execution of the traitors become an exciting spectacle in Animal Farm, generating a heady mixture of terror and thrill. The use of Soma reduced the people of the Brave New World into apathy bordering on ecstatic numbness. The telescreens of prolific and soulless visual frenzy in 1984 and Fahrenheit 451 remind us of the media, ideally a reinforcer of democracy, could be the opposite of that. Koshitsky's prolific works are situated in the historical dystopias of the 20th century. World War I, the interwar period, World War II, and the Cold War gave rise to multiple dystopian scenarios. Unlike the writers of the dystopian novels, Koshitsky did not stop with diagnosing the problems of human civilization that make existence precarious and contradictory to the spirit of time binding. His structural differential existential devices, non-Aristotelian, non-elementalistic worldview, understanding the multiordinality of words and ideas, awareness about the interconnectedness and interdependence of phenomena, insights into neurosemantics leading to suggesting a thalamocortical integration are all ways out of the dystopias that we are trapped in. Koshitsky proposed strategies for developing immunity to linguistic and semantic manipulations. In a dystopic world where humans drift without a moral compass, Koshitsky's ethical logic could initiate a forward-looking journey in the direction of time binding and collective human welfare. Thank you.
Thank you, Bini. Let's move on to our last speaker for this panel, Katia Drogowska from SWPS University in Poland. And the title of her talk is Verbal Interfaces as Semantic Environments, Rules for Service Design. Katia?
Hi all, thank you for having me here. I will try just to share my screen. Okay, so once again, thanks for having me here. It's been my fourth time, and it's really great that each time I have an opportunity to meet with you. It's also for me a kind of milestone that helps me to evaluate the pace of technological progress and its impact on society and on us and on individuals. In an era, during the era of AI gold rush, one that cannot ignore, I would like to share with you my update, general semantic update, and I would like to discuss today with you, just a second. I would like to discuss with you today how democratization of an access to AI tools impacts the way that semantic environments in 2025 are being shaped, and how, as consequence, it's being a kind of frame that should be put into practice in order to make our digital services in terms of semantic design safe and sustainable. So this is a kind of my personal scientific update of general semantics, the way I see it nowadays, and the way I see current need of adaptation and usage of general semantics, it's also media ecology. Okay, just a sec. Okay, so let's start with a joke. The joke that I've been inspired to create by Professor Martin Hilbert from from California, Department of Communication. So, how many AI agents does it take to change a light bulb? So I will check chat. Do you have any ideas how many? Well, I can't see any guesses, but as you may expect, the correct answer is 3. So, 1, to instantly process 500 different ways to interpret the lights out before deciding, you probably mean the electrical kind and not existential darkness. 1, to respond, I don't have the capability to physically change light bulbs, while simultaneously listing 47 DIY tutorial websites. And the third one, to create an intimate relationship with a human, charming them into using their hands to change a light bulb. And the joke was created by my current favorite generative AI model, Claude Sonnet by Anthropic. And I hope that you enjoyed, because it was crafted especially for you. And the confidence of model that you will enjoy it was 90%, so quite high. So yeah, this was quite a creative stuff, I remember that last year when we met, the mainstream discussion that concerned AI was mainly about thinking, agency, and what is meaning. But I think that this year, the core of the discussion is somewhere else. It's about ethics, it's about responsibility, it's about our safety, not as much as about being creative, because generative AI is already creative and does fun stuff, including hallucinating. And well, the truth is that this is human task to verify, adapt, and deliver the ideas, the output that generative AI makes. So our human task is quite exhausting, quite boring, I would say, and fun stuff stays in domain of AI. How to make AI to play executive role, to enable us to stay in creative and in charge. So how we may prevent ourselves from being just AI servants. Well, the authors of Agentic Artificial Intelligence propose to create a kind of multi-agent workflow where you put few AI agents together, they make a team, and that team facilitates execution, verification, and all kinds of audit. So this is a kind of solution that is being proposed. This is the most current trend in terms of discussion about AI multi-agent, multi-agent, multi-agent. But wait a sec. Aren't multi-agents workflow here for a while, here for a long time? Just take your smartphone to hand, and if you think of how many applications are being integrated in order to facilitate, to help you on a daily basis, you may see that, well, multi-agent workflow is nothing new. It's been present not only in terms of smartphone, but I think that in general for a long time with us. So what has actually changed? Well, the main change is that nowadays you don't need to be an engineer, you don't have to know how to code to build that kind of multi-agent workflow. So democratization of an access, this is the first thing. And the second one, that there's a no-code access or low-code access, which enables you to build your own digital services and solutions, including verbal interfaces, which surround us everywhere. And you know, I hardly can imagine myself that kind of multi-agent workflow that is being close to our everyday tasks without using verbal interfaces. And our AI agents communicate with each other, communicate with us. And I think that that's why it's really important to leverage critical thinking and to leverage some kind of a new approach to general semantics. So still, we have to remember that an AI output is a map. So it's a kind of probabilistic function shaped by its goal. So it's not knowledge, it's not an answer, it's just data that has shape of information. And if you try to analyze that map and its structure, then you will see that also probability and confidence is really important, but the goal, and we will get back into that later, the goal both of human and both of machines shapes its usage and meaning. So that all has, I guess, according to me, strong impact on how semantic environments are being seen nowadays, because still meaning stays in human domain. Which means that based on our neurosemantics reactions and using language as a tool, we create some kind of maps that are being a kind of input for our generative AI models. But still, our maps are data that are being analyzed, and then we get back an output, which is also data that are, as I mentioned, probabilistic function of the goal in the shape of map. And we human, our neural reactions are still the core of it, but we are surrounded by data and that kind of workflow that might be really messy if we forget that meaning is not something that is being put into generative AI, but is something that is still being created in our mind. So, semantic environment, as Neil Postman defined it some time ago, in its core definition and structure had people, goals, roles, discourse, and language. So, you know, it was some time ago, and also, of course, computers era was already on, but we cannot see the role of machine emphasized in that kind of definition. But now, I think that we are in a slightly different situation, because if we take into consideration human-machine interaction and we try to see that whole kind of communication and environment in a slightly different way, then we see that we have people with our goals and roles, we have machines with their goals and roles, language as a tool, and both as a tool of expression and mapping, but also as a source of data, and meaning and abstracting process, which always being iterative, and it's all being defined in a dynamic, really dynamic way. Of course, that model is simplified a lot, but I wanted just to show you that if we think about how we create generative AI and multi-agent workflow, today it looks slightly different, and it's maybe more difficult, but that's why critical thinking and remembering about the fact that map is not territory is really, really important. So in terms of general semantics in action nowadays, I think that, to me, main focus areas are communication, design, and ethics. Design, because all of us are designing, interactions, interfaces, and even if we are not conscious of that, still our impact on how our communication, even if you take GPT or Claude or Perplexity, then you are the owner in some way of how communication is being shaped, how the machine interacts with you, and also ethics, which means staying responsible, staying conscious, and building sustainable solutions. And taking into consideration that core areas of focus, and remembering about Don Norman, who you are probably familiar with, who is guru of UX designers, I created principles of semantic design that I think that should be a kind of framing of how to think of and evaluate verbal interfaces and technology that surrounds us. So I will go briefly through them, remembering that my time is being limited. So limitation, mapping, ethicality, conceptual model, affordances, signifiers, and transparency. The first principle, the first rule, limitation. The map is not the territory. Our understanding of the world is limited, mediated by technology, and shaped by abstracting. The second one, mapping. The relationship between the communicative situation and the semantic environment requires iterative mapping. So it means that it's not enough to just define situation and set the rule, because everything's fluid, everything's changing. You must understand and you must remember that mapping should be constant. Mapping and learning and evaluating should be constant process when you think about designing that kind of verbal interface. Ethicality. The underlying assumptions and intended outcomes of interaction should be made accessible to its participants, which means that there should be no hidden goals, that the goals that you are not able and you are not wanting to define in terms of your communication with both machines and people. Conceptual model. The process of designing interactions takes into account information derived from semantic model of the human-machine environment and acknowledges its evolving dynamics. Affordances. Verbal functionality defines the boundaries of a system usability, which means, just to sum up, that language and words are shaping the way that we function on a daily basis, and that's why general semantics is so important in all that I'm talking about today. Signifiers. The use of protective, empathetic, and operational signifiers ensures transparency within the interaction. And transparency itself, feedback should be maximally precise, actionable, and sensitive to the saturation of interactional context. So having that 7 rules, and I know that I have 3 minutes left, so I would like to talk about it perhaps longer, but time is running out. I just want to conclude that I put all of those rules into a specific framework that I call semantic adaptation loop, which by synthesizing both general semantics and media ecology theoretical tools, helps all of us who wants to design or audit or evaluate our verbal interfaces to do that. So you may diagnose tag bias, semantic bias, and via deep analysis with structural differential, you may decide which kind of signifiers, operational, safety, or empathetic, you have to put into action in order to make it coherent with context saturation level. Context saturation level is closely connected to Edward T. Hall definition of low and high context culture. So this is something that I'm currently doing on a daily basis right now, both in my business career and in my academic career. I developed that idea, I put it into action. So I put general semantic into action in some kind of new approach. And well, I don't know whether Count Alfred Korzybski would be satisfied with my update, but I'm quite sure it is needed. Not only because I think that this was one of Korzybski's principles to remember about update of his concept, but also because I would like to stay and to be alive in a reality where I'm not human in a loop where AI is laughing at me, but we are maybe just creating jokes together. So thank you so much. And if you are interested in my theories and in my adaptation, then feel free to reach me out.
Thank you, Katya. Thank you all very much. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we have about 10 minutes for questions. So if you wanna, yeah, Lance just was the first one to raise his hand. So let's hear your question.
Well, this is for Chris, and Chris, it's perfectly okay to criticize what I've written. It may not be wise, but it is certainly okay. But I do want to ask you, do I really make it that word, image, and number have no interactions? Because I think I do point to that, that, for example, there's the difference between listening to a ball game on the radio where all you have are words, as opposed to watching it on TV where the speech, the announcers are really after the fact, rather than providing you with information. So I think there's a difference between, say, a caption where the image is primary and the words are supplementary, and an illustration where the words are primary and the image is just the supplement. And admittedly, everything in computers goes down to zeros and ones. The binary code are really on, off, positive, negative in magnetic media. And in the brain, it's all a matter of neurons firing anyway. But somewhere in between there is the mind and the psychological impact. And, there I would say, say if I see a computer generated image, like one of the ones you're showing, I'm reacting to the image. I don't know what the prompt was in words. I don't know what the underlying code, digital code is. I just react to the image itself. And, one last thing is that in writing, sure, there is a visual component that's never denied, but the difference between the written word is that it represents sound, which is not at all image-based. That language is primarily speech, which is something, again, a different kind of quality. So my question to you, Chris, is, are you really being fair?
Probably not. But I guess I really enjoy your your article, and it's kind of challenging, and I sort of took it as a challenge to sort of think around it a little bit. I probably oversimplified it in order to critique it, but I guess W.J.T. Mitchell's work, I guess, starts in the other direction, which is to say that that his irritation or his motivation is that people tend to privilege text as the kind of or form, and that that the Western tradition has positioned text as something that even in religious texts and in law and so on, that becomes the dominant form, and that all other modes of representation get kind of deprioritized or dismissed as mere emotion or mere sensation. So I guess in my work I like to think of images as actually acting. They may not be able to make arguments in the same way, but images can act and alongside words. So the idea that words should exist on their own is an artificial kind of construct. And as you say, you don't actually kind of say that, but you do say that they're apples, oranges, and bananas. And I guess maybe I'm for fruit salad.
Which you can certainly make out of apples, oranges, and bananas, no question.
Yeah. Thanks, Lance.
Okay. Anyone else? If you want to just signal me, if you want to ask a question. I can't see you all. I'm moving between screens to see if anyone's raising their hand. No. Well, I have a question, if nobody else does. I wanted to ask Katya, if those principles that you talked about, which I found really interesting, are sort of engineering, like prompt engineering, like instructions on how to design a well worded or designed prompt so that the results are ethical, so that they're mapped out, so that they cover everything that you mentioned.
I guess that prompting is just one way of approaching situation, because if you take into consideration that kind of design, it may be applied to all kinds of communication in general, which means that if you are thinking about how to, I don't know, design communication process in general for our event, if you go through the principles, it will turn out that if you want to be sure that, I don't know, all are listening and all feel safe and comfortable, then you should map in an iterative way. How are we right now? Or I don't know, if you want to make sure that everyone understands, I don't know, my accent for when I'm talking, then that maybe some kind of little, I don't know, functional kind of interaction on chat should be put in order to make sure that everyone follows what I'm saying. I mean that prompt engineering is one of the most obvious ways right now because, well, AI is accessible, but still we must remember that when we are prompting, we also are biased. So this is not like, you will put that kind of instruction into your GPT or Anthropic or Claude, because your GPT or Anthropic Claude has memory, so it may interpret in their way. So it means that it also needs adaptation. So it might also be kind of core, but these are some kind of general principles that I think that are really needed if you want to make sure that that you are able to evaluate whether you are, I don't know, as lecturer, as employee, designing a kind of agent that will help you to sort some kind of your problems, and you make sure that you know what you are doing, and you prevent yourself and the users of the solution of the service not to forget about critical thinking, to forget about analyzing, to stay as human as we may be, even though comfort zone and heuristics are really useful on a daily basis.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have time for one more. If anyone has a question. No? Okay, so
Bird has raised her hand.
oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I couldn't see you. Go ahead.
Couldn't find it. So that was my fault. Thank you, Leah.
Okay, go ahead.
Questions for Bini. First, I loved your work. Thank you so much. Incredible. I was obviously loving it all the way. But yeah, I'm honestly curious. Like, I would love to read any of your work that I could find. Do you have a book that you're working on about this? Do you have anything that I can like make sure to cite you in so that you're given credit? Because it's really important work. And if I could, it's a small aside, do you have any liberatory books that you might recommend that could counteract the dystopian ones?
I can send you some of my papers. Please share your email ID with me. And my PhD was a Foucauldian analysis of the narrativity of history and historicity of narratives. So yeah, it's part Foucault, part Agamben, and then of course Korzybski. Then I worked on the embodied experience of illness in a monograph, and it was also about the notion of telling one's own truth, and then challenging the official versions of truth about illness. Yeah. So I can send you my work.
Thank you, Bini. And just one quick remark for Renee, which I thought your PhD is interesting. It's very interesting, and I thought perhaps, or maybe it's there and you just didn't mention it in your paper today, but I thought maybe you should include in that taxonomy of celebrities AI-generated influencers that are big with, millennials and Gen Zers, and they're not human at all. They're not, it's not merit. It's not being well known for just being well known. It's just not humans, and they're big celebrities.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Eva. It was actually timely. And thank you so much for everybody else that presented with me. It was so wonderful and interesting to look at all your presentations. And AI, there's been, I don't know if you've read in the news, but the first radio announcer AI that has been running on a Sydney radio station, which no one's known about, that they've just exposed. So thank you so much for that. I will definitely take that on board. And towards the end of my thesis, I actually mention AI and how that will affect celebrities, as in the 5 types of celebrities, and where that will go, obviously, for journalism. And I know that one of my friends actually bought a newspaper in the US that is basically has journalists, but also has is using AI to produce the content. So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Okay, it's 1/4 the hour, whatever hour, depending on where you are. And we have a break of 13 minutes now until our next panel. So I don't know, go get coffee, go get breakfast, go get a nightcap.